link again.
And then
I'll log out and log back in.
I sure can. Monica, are you okay if I go ahead and start with the content?
Please do. Please do.
All right. So sorry about that, folks. Here we go with technology, right? We're going into our second full year of the pandemic, and we are still kind of processing, right? But that's okay. Thank you again, everybody, for hopping on and joining us today. My name is June Klein-Bacon, and I am with the Brain Injury Alliance of Iowa. I'm just going to mute a few folks here that are logging in so that we have some good audio. So if you are joining us and you haven't yet, we would love to hear from you in the chat. Where you're logging in from, what your interest is in this informational session. Again, my name is June Klein-Bacon. My pronouns are she and her. I am with the Brain Injury Alliance of Iowa. I serve as project manager, and I am up in Black Hawk County at this point, and just working on staying warm. And hopefully briefly, Monica Gedkin will be joining us. And when she gets her opportunity to chat, I hope that she will take a moment to introduce herself. We've been able to partner with Department of Public Health on a variety of projects, and I'll actually go ahead and switch over to our disclosures. The Brain Injury Alliance of Iowa is supported through a couple of different contracts through the Department of Public Health and through the Brain Injury Services Program. In addition, one of the contracts that we have to bring you this content today is through funding that the Department of Public Health has through the ACL, Administration for Community Living grant that they were able to get. In addition, I would just note that the screening tool that we'll be just touching briefly on today is a screening tool that we've adopted with permission from Ohio State University. It's the TBI identification method, and we've adopted it here in Iowa with a few modifications. And any information that you hear today that may be clinical in nature or thinking about medical, down the medical road, we definitely want to make sure that this presentation is not taken as medical advice. If you have questions regarding diagnosis, treatment, that kind of thing, we do ask that you speak with your medical provider and not avoid getting any treatment as a result of anything that you might hear on here today. So again, we really just wanted this information to be conversational. So hope that you will be able to, put questions in the chat. We'll try to monitor that as Monica gets back on. But the core concepts that we plan to address today is just talking briefly about some concepts to give you guys all some information and maybe open some doors to thinking about getting additional information. We're going to be talking about the prevalence and incidence of acquired brain injury, both in the general population in the United States, but also when we start to think about under or inappropriately served populations as it comes to individuals with brain injury engaging in other systems. Monica, with her expertise, is going to speak about public health information related to partner-inflicted brain injury, and also addressing some of those behavioral outcomes as it relates to public health. And we will speak briefly about opportunities for folks to be able to access additional information and resources that we have available to you all. All right, so first, let's go ahead and just put it out on the table. Our goal is not for you all to become experts about brain injury or in brain injury, but really just to explore the topic and how it pertains to the critical work that you all are doing in the community. We are, of course, not asking you to diagnose brain injury, but just understand that it exists and think about how it's impacting survivors that you're encountering. We want to support successful interactions that you're having with people with brain injury, whether you are currently aware that you're interacting with brain injury, people with brain injury or not. So we might suggest some strategies, some information, but I, again, just want to note that we're just touching, the surface today. When we talk about the definition of brain injury and what defines a brain injury, we know that many people kind of come to the table with maybe not having an understanding that they have a brain injury. When we look at the terms that we use here in Iowa to define brain injury, we look at acquired brain injury as an umbrella term. So we have underneath of that non-traumatic brain injuries, which are about internal insults to the brain. So you might think of things like stroke, encephalitis, hemorrhages, or even anoxia. So somebody that might have, say, an overdose or a heart attack or a cardiac event, that they have oxygen cut off from the brain. We also see that with strangulation, choking, near drownings. Those are some things that you might hear people say rather than using the words brain injury. Also under that umbrella is traumatic brain injury. Sorry about that, folks. So when we also have underneath that umbrella traumatic brain injury. So traumatic brain injury is often what I hear people think about or explain when they hear brain injury. So traumatic brain injury is really about physics. We're talking about an external force causing the brain to bounce around in our skull, right? We have a very hard bone skull, which is a great design to protect our brain. However, when there's a force that is strong enough to cause our brain to move around within our skull, that can result in traumatic brain injury. So things that you might think of and hear of when we talk about traumatic brain injury might be a result of a motor vehicle crash, a fall, other situations where they might hit their head or have it hit by something else. I do want to note here that a concussion is also a mild traumatic brain injury. Oftentimes, I miss being in a room full of folks, because one of the questions I might ask is, raise your hand if you or somebody else that you know has had a brain injury. And often what I will get is, a couple of hands raised, particularly when I'm speaking with groups that aren't, in a brain injury niche in terms of service provision. But then when I ask, do you or have you, or do you know somebody that's ever had a concussion? And then I get all kinds of hands that fly up. And so this is just a reminder that concussion is a mild traumatic brain injury. It does fall under this definition of brain injury. So I do want to just talk a little bit about numbers here when we're looking at Iowans. To put this in perspective, if you're familiar with home and community-based waiver services, about 1,500, so 1,500 people in the state of Iowa receive home and community-based services. If you're not familiar with those types of services, it's where individuals can live in the community, whether that be a group setting or on their own or with family, and they're getting services paid for by Medicaid. So again, when you're looking at these numbers, about 1,500 people are getting those types of services on the brain injury waiver. In Iowa, we have about 100,000 Iowans living with disability as a result of acquired brain injury. So when we think about the level of acuity and what people are experiencing as a result of brain injury, we know that many brain injuries and many outcomes are actually mild in nature, but mild can be a very relative term. So when we think about the outcomes and what people may experience in terms of challenges following brain injury, they might not rise to the level of needing services. They might fly under the radar. Folks might be having trouble, maintaining housing, maintaining transportation, maintaining jobs, or reaching the goals that they want to because of perhaps some challenges that they might be experiencing, but that don't necessarily rise to the level of needing those home and community-based services. So beyond the initial injury, as we continue to evaluate the needs of individuals with brain injury, we certainly recognize that brain injury is a chronic condition and impacts people's lifelong, long after the event of brain injury. And in that similar vein, brain injury rarely occurs in a vacuum. We continue to learn more about the prevalence rates of brain injury within other systems, which brings us to our conversation today. And I see that Monica is watching the chat and checking things out in there. So if there's questions, please feel free to put them in there as well. So generally about 4 to 8% of the population has experienced brain injury. And that really lines up with the numbers that we see with folks that experience long-term disability as a result of brain injury here in Iowa. When we take a look at individuals that are also having these other life experiences, we start to recognize really rather some impressive numbers that people are experiencing brain injury, which is why one of the reasons why we're here today. So as you can kind of see, some different life experiences and situations and systems really that people can connect with when we think about brain injury. And so again, kind of thinking about that, 4 to 8% of people have sustained brain injury. When we look at mental health or brain health conditions, 34 to 49% of people with mental health conditions have also sustained a brain injury. When we look at pediatrics or children's behavioral health, 2/3 of children that are under the age of 3 that have been physically abused have also sustained a traumatic brain injury. We are seeing studies that are showing that upwards of 60 to 80% of individuals who have sustained brain injury prior to incarceration, so people that are involved, that are justice involved, 60 to 80% of studies are showing that those that are justice involved have also sustained brain injury prior to any incarceration. And we also know that about 20% of people who sustain brain injury will begin using substances or misusing substances following brain injury. And we have a couple of other groups here that are listed. We know that about upwards of 60% of those that experience homelessness and those that are refugees have also sustained brain injury. So those are some really quick and, in my opinion, pretty powerful numbers to think about when you're thinking about the people that you are serving that may be, in and out of different systems or have different life experiences that we may be missing brain injury as a layer. This is not to say that understanding brain injury is a silver bullet, but it is to say that it's a layer of a larger picture in that human experience. We know that undiagnosed or untreated brain injuries can result in individuals being labeled as non-compliant or even make it more difficult to engage in the services that are being offered or suggested, or in some cases even ordered. They may face day-to-day challenges with success, let alone new expectations that might be placed on them in a given system, or in our case today, problem-solving courts, right? I want to share a brief story, and then I'm going to invite Monica to share a bit about partner-inflicted brain injury. When I had the opportunity several years ago to participate in a screening exercise with individuals, with women in particular, that were getting services through a community corrections program. And I screened about 53 women, and I screened 53 women. I had one woman walk in saying that she had a brain injury, that she was able to describe her brain injury. Many of those women didn't understand why they were sitting down with me, questioned why they were sitting down with me. But as we talked and as we did the screening exercise, 67% of those women screened positive for brain injury. Again, not diagnostic, but they screened positive. In addition to that, we documented over 90 possible incidences of traumatic brain injury. And over 45 of those incidences were a result of violence, whether that be some sort of assault, intimate partner inflicted. So this topic is pretty powerful, particularly when we think about individuals that are connected to our justice system, when we think about individuals that are experiencing violence in their life. And so I will go ahead, I'll flip to the next screen, and I'm going to invite Monica to share a little bit about herself, if she could go ahead and do her introduction.
Sure.
And go ahead and engage with your slides here.
All right, thank you, June. Again, I apologize. My laptop is on its last leg. I did some troubleshooting and we're not going to have video today. But yeah, so I'm Monica Gedkin, and I've been involved in the movement to end violence for over a decade now, both personally as well as professionally. And I currently am at the Department of Public Health in the Division of Health Promotion and Chronic Disease Prevention. And so prior to being at the health department, I was with the State Domestic Violence Coalition, the Iowa Coalition Against Domestic Violence. The Iowa Coalition Against Domestic Violence and the Iowa Department of Public Health have historically worked together at the intersection of brain injury, specifically traumatic brain injury, and intimate partner violence. In the most recent years, we have come to better understand what is partner inflicted brain injury, being an injury that is sustained within exposure to intimate partner violence. And so there have been different studies conducted. You are all in this work. You are working with survivors who are navigating systems. You see things that come up frequently. You may see individuals who are experiencing irritability, who are managing depression, fatigue, anxiety, sleep disruptions. And what we see is this intimate partner violence? Is this traumatic brain injury? Or is it both in that overlapping space? And so for our conversation today, we are focusing on some tangible ideas of what event could cause a traumatic brain injury within an intimate partner violence dynamic. So relationships where intimate partner violence is present. A partner who hits your face or your head. That is a really prominent indicator that a potential partner inflicted brain injury has occurred. One other aspect, it's not just a physical strike or blow to the head or face or the neck, but also the loss of air. So when we look at survivors who have experienced being choked or strangled, loss of consciousness, all of those events that happen within intimate partner violence relationships are examples of partner inflicted brain injury. So these are some of the most common that you see listed there. And this conversation is informational. And so really we're sharing this as an entry point for all of you to expand your exposure to the National Center on Partner Inflicted Brain Injury. And you'll see the visual there is a resource that's called Invisible Injuries, about when your head is hurt. This is a great resource for folks working with the general population because the amount of traumatic brain injuries is high when you're working with folks engaged in any type of system, whether that be the healthcare system, the victim services system, the court system. We're seeing a higher amount of those individuals living with an undiagnosed traumatic brain injury. There was one study that was conducted specifically by the Ohio Domestic Violence Network, that is the entity that houses the National Center on Partner Inflicted Brain Injury. And they found that over 80% of survivors entering victim services, specifically emergency shelter, had been hit, and over 83% had been strangled by a partner. And so we both have the lived experience as those working with survivors, navigating systems, as well as the aggregate public health data to say we have health outcomes that have come about after being exposed to intimate partner violence. And so through this discussion today, where we will provide you all with additional resources, as well as expand our conversation on how can we best respond to survivors as they're navigating these experiences. So I'll hand that back over to you, June. Thank you. So as it relates to outcomes, we're really looking at a person who's exposed to violence, intimate partner violence being that focus area on our discussion today, is at greater risk for experiencing health issues as well as behavioral issues. And so I want to pause and engage the group right now. If you're comfortable using the chat box, please feel free to type into the chat box some of the most common health experiences, health issues that you see amongst folks navigating the system that you're involved in, or some of the behavioral things that you see. So go ahead and type into the chat box some of the common things that you're aware of just from the nature of your work. An example might be missed appointments. If you prefer not to use the chat box, you can definitely raise your hand now and just share out some of the observations you've had in your profession. Coming into the chat box, we're seeing mental health concerns such as depression, anxiety, PTSD, chronic substance use and abuse issues. Absolutely. Headaches, substance use disorder, difficulty relating events or relaying events, like sharing those components out and remembering appointments or conversations. That's huge. All of this, right? And so we're looking at these life experiences as outcomes. When you are exposed to violence, when you are exposed to the life hazard of intimate partner violence, there's health outcomes related to that, and that isn't the individual's choice or fault around what they are utilizing as a coping mechanism while they are in survival mode. That's great. Does anything else come to mind for folks? One thing that has been emerging in the last decade is more public health specific data around health conditions and exposure to intimate partner violence. So heart conditions. Has anyone read the recent articles that have come out from the American Heart Association that shows survivors of intimate partner violence have a greater risk of cardiovascular disease than those not exposed to intimate partner violence? And so when we're looking at these dynamics, you can visually see on your screen a list of a variety of health outcomes. And if you're someone who's working in a healthcare setting, or you're someone working in a court system setting, victim services setting, there are components that come forward. Someone might not say directly when they first interact with you, I'm a survivor, and this is what I've experienced. But what we're looking at are health and behavioral indicators. So these are health indicators that intimate partner violence or other forms of violence may be present in this person's life, either currently or in the past. So for those who are interested, for those who are aware of ACEs, the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study, we can see there's a direct correlation between experiencing life adversity and our health outcomes and our behavioral outcomes. Additional things that we see, seatbelt use. So there's a study done about emergency department patients looking at health behaviors, and we will see diminished seatbelt use when it comes to those exposed to intimate partner violence. Now, this is a close correlation to understanding our limbic system and our brain in crisis response, where we have diminished executive functioning because we're exposed to a serious life event. And when it is chronic across the course of a relationship, it becomes more and more compounded. So Desiree posted out some additional comments. Absolutely, this is on point. Memory issues, huge emotional changes, PTSD, new chronic disorders as a result of a traumatic brain injury. Sleep disorders are huge, mental health and substance abuse, all of those, right? So as we have this conversation, the intention is for our collective awareness. The intention is for our collective call to action in challenging ourselves, in challenging our practices as we engage with our patients, our consumers, our clients, in thinking about, is our protocol aligned with reasonable accommodations for those living with health and behavioral outcomes of both traumatic brain injury, PTSD, when we add in the fact that violence doesn't live in one setting. So if we're exposed to intimate partner violence, we're a part of community. We may also have experiences with child sexual abuse. We may also be a veteran. There are so many factors at play here. And so really moving towards our humility in how we can center intimate partner violence as a public health issue that requires public health, community, and societal level solutions. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the next slide, June. Pass that over to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Monica. Really appreciate your insights there. And I do think that conversation really lends itself to this slide. Now, this slide is probably very small on your screen, depending on what kind of screen you're using, but it is a resource that we have here at BIA. The slide really is up here for us to think about and start to understand all the different functions that reside within our brain. All of our functions, automated or not, learned behavior, our physicality, our emotional behavioral responses, our cognitive responses are all functions of our brain. And so when we have changes in our brain, when we have injury to our brain, that can affect our function. I can tell you that this slide here, while a picture of the brain may be pretty rudimentary if you're a neurologist or somebody that has a lot of experience in looking at the brain and understanding the brain, but it gives us a picture of all these different functions. It gives us an opportunity to think about if the brain is impacted in a specific area, how that might translate into challenges with functions. It also gives us an opportunity to think about where a person's strengths are and how we might be able to build on those. I can tell you our staff at BIA probably could talk about this slide alone and the different components of the slide for hours on end. Because when we know that there is a functional challenge or a hiccup in function, that it can lead to a variety of different outcomes. And so the other amazing thing about the brain is something called neuroplasticity. We have the opportunity to grow and strengthen neural pathways and the different functions in our brain. So this is something just as a takeaway to be aware that brain injury is absolutely complicated. No brain injury is the same, but it can be navigable. And there are opportunities to provide some support and learning opportunities to develop strategies or engage other people with natural supports or even paid supports when appropriate to look at how do we navigate brain injury. These next few slides, I actually, with permission, use them out of a organization out of Colorado. I find them pretty impactful in terms of thinking about brain development. And I'm not going to, again, because this is an informational session, I don't want to go too deep into this, but I think it provides us a really nice visual and a really nice takeaway. We of course have the building blocks of brain development. If we all think about childhood development and what that looks like, and in a neurotypical fashion, we start with the development of these fundamental processes down here in the orange. If you can see that color on the bottom of this pyramid, the memory, processing speed, attention, and so forth. Having those strengthened and having a good foundation leads to your next building blocks when we think about those intermediate processes: language, learning, visual spatial. And then when we think about higher order, we're starting to get into those things like executive functioning, different competencies related to social and emotional engagement. And then when we have this very strong foundation, we have this achievement and cognitive abilities and reasoning abilities that happen when we have kind of an overall functioning there at the top of the pyramid. We could take away really any of these components, and you can see very quickly what happens to our pyramid. We have, we have somewhat, different functions that are kind of falling off and being challenged. We have some that, if we take away attention, we have some that can completely collapse. And so with that visual, I would just invite you to really start thinking about what skills do you require or are required of your clients, of your patients, of the people that you're working with, or you yourself to be successful? What accommodations do you consider applying without hesitation? So often we think about, maybe a physical disability that we might apply accommodations without any hesitation. If somebody has a mobility issue or challenge, mobilizing across your building or across your office, what changes would you make to help them be successful? When we think about service planning, or when we think about treatment plans for someone with functional changes as a result of brain injury, then I've got a little bit of an echo there. Then we start to think about, when we have functional challenges, can we start to think about skill versus will? Can we start to think about maybe a lack of skill versus a choice that somebody might be making to miss appointments, to forget information that you've given them? There's a variety of things, right? We can go back to the slide here, and we could fill in the blank with a number of functions that if we start to think about that skill versus will, we may start to come around the table to think about what how do we identify the function that's impacted and start to think about how to address that so that somebody can progress with skill or with requirements that they might have within a given program, or to be successful with a treatment plan or service plan, which we then know is going to be something, or likely would be something, that would translate into other goals that they have. I'm going to do a brief, just a couple of slides here on some resources that we have at the Brain Injury Alliance of Iowa. They're available and free on our website. We have accommodation tip sheets. And so when we know that we've got some different functions that are labeled here that we might be looking at trying to address with someone, when we have maybe picked up on issues related to attention or organization, then we've got some pretty simplified sheets to use as a starting point. So I've got a couple of examples laid out here. We've got one, delayed processing. So all of these tip sheets, and we're hoping to grow our library here, but they all start with a definition. What is it that what is delayed processing? So you can see that there's a definition, and the accommodation tip sheets have a definition of that function. And if somebody is experiencing challenges in that area, it gives you things that you might look for to describe a functional challenge in that area. And then again, just as a starting point, these may not be a fix-all, but it starts the conversation. There are accommodation considerations. So when we look at this, if somebody has some challenges with delayed processing, they might be missing components of instruction. They might appear unmotivated or uncooperative, non-compliant, might be words that we might be using. Some accommodations might be to think about limiting distractions, using active communication strategies, right? These are all going to be accommodations or considerations that would be helpful for many folks, not just somebody with brain injury. Got another example here on impulsivity and inhibition. So somebody that might be struggling or have functional challenges in this area may say or do things without regard to their safety or the impact that those decisions might have. They might have challenges of knowing when to stop. They may fail to see the consequences of their actions. And again, recognize that I might be describing lots of folks that you work with. They might not all have brain injury, but this is just, again, a layer of consideration. So there are some different accommodation considerations to consider. Again, these are free on our website, and we can get those linked in the chat for you to be able to reference as well. But I do invite, Monica has a really neat resource that comes out of from Rachel Ramirez. And so I'd love to, Monica, if you could share a little bit about this resource, which I think is really great.
Absolutely. I'm going to go ahead and share out in the chat. First, I'm going to share the Spanish version. So go ahead. If your primary language is Spanish, feel free to open that one up. And then if your primary language is English, go ahead and open up the one that I just sent out. So the National Center on Partner-Inflicted Brain Injury has a variety of resources available that are really validating and affirming for folks who are living with traumatic brain injury. So I want to take a moment now for the group to go ahead, if you haven't clicked on that link yet, go ahead and click on it and open up. What you're seeing is the Just Breathe, a Guide to Wellness. So these are the ones directly off of the National Center for Partner-Inflicted Brain Injuries website. And I want you to spend about 5 minutes or so reviewing it. I want you to identify one component within the wellness guide that you believe would be beneficial or supportive to the folks that you're working in service to. And then after we've reviewed it for about 5 minutes, we'll come back together as a group and share out oh my gosh, this component of looking at my strengths and my wellness goals is going to be, I can just see the folks I'm working with energetic and excited about that, or some of the exercises that are in there. So we're going to pause and allow everyone to take time to review the Just Breathe resource before we come back together. And we'll come back together, let's say 9:50 for discussion. So please review those and we'll reconvene at 9:50. All right, we are reconvening now. Please feel free to raise your hand or to utilize the chat box to share out the page number and the activity that you came across in the Just Breathe, A Guide to Wellness, that you are most excited about, that you believe will be beneficial to the folks that you're working in service to. On page 5, staying well, understanding what my wellness looks like is important. That's an amazing activity within there because it centers on supporting that individual's autonomy and their expert knowledge on themselves and what their wellness looks like, and them defining wellness as well. Page 19, the emotional thermometer. Oh, that's a great one. I absolutely love that one because it centers around self-reflection and checking in with ourselves. Page 8, the question asking how the individual would prefer staff to help them. Whoa, right? That's amazing in how we can engage with folks. They can say directly, these are my preferences. Page 18, asking others for help if I'm overwhelmed. Oh my gosh, right? That is immensely helpful and supportive. Page 19, anger feelings, the barometer with the kiddos working with that still need that skill. Oh my gosh, absolutely. Yes. So just in that brief amount of time, several of us were able to look at this guide to wellness and identify different activities that we can join in conversation with the folks that we're working with. And so it's a very helpful resource. On the left, the You Are Strong, that is an excerpt from the Invisible Injuries resource. And so one thing I wanted to share with everyone now is that Rachel Ramirez will be training virtually to all of Iowa. If you haven't registered for that yet, please do so. After that training, we will have available on the Iowa Department of Public Health's website and the Brain Injury Alliance of Iowa's website. Through our Stop Violence Against Women Act funds at the Health Department, we are working with Rachel Ramirez, and we modified those national level resources to include Iowa-specific information. And so we do have the victim call center number added. We have the Brain Injury Alliance of Iowa hotline number available. So folks who are looking at that guide for wellness will have resources for who they can call to get connected to a neuro resource facilitator and have that available. So thank you everyone for reviewing that guide. And please reach out to myself or June if you would also like to have that guide available electronically, and if you want to have that available on your webpage for folks who are reaching out to get services from you all. So I'm going to hand it back over to you, June.
Thank you so much. That guide is incredibly powerful, and I'm so looking forward to having Rachel Ramirez present here in Iowa coming up in a couple of weeks here. So we do just want to wrap up with a few things here. One, if you are aware that somebody you're serving has a brain injury, or if your organization or the program that you're working with determines that you want to implement brain injury screening, which is absolutely something that the Brain Injury Alliance of Iowa can chat with you about. There are some ways to respond, right? So one, if diagnosis is necessary, or if there are some things going on, it is important to refer that person back to a health professional, a medical professional, to develop a plan for assessment or diagnosis, and or evaluate, if there's any treatment that's needed at that time. It's also important that we take the time to communicate with that person the importance of sharing with others about brain injury, whether that be the treatment team, service providers, and natural supports when that is safe and appropriate to do so. Because we know that folks are getting supports from hopefully getting supports from many different areas in their life, and sharing out this information can be really powerful. Monica mentioned that the Brain Injury Alliance of Iowa is available for resources and support as well. I do want to highlight a couple of really our core program is our Neuro Resource Facilitation Program. It is a phone-based program for Iowans. Here in Iowa, we are funded through the Department of Public Health to provide this service for free to Iowans, right? The funding is covered through the Department of Public Health for the services that we provide. And that service is available for individuals that experience brain injury. It's available for their family members and caregivers and friends, those natural supports that are around them. It's also available for professionals that are serving folks. So on the professional side, we do have a network called the Iowa Brain Injury Resource Network, or IBRN for short. IBRN members that apply, that are able to join, are able to access additional training in services. Of course, we have newsletters and updates that come out. We also provide resources for you to have on hand, hard copy resources. We, of course, have a variety of resources that are available on our website that you're welcome to engage with as well. For IBRN members, where it applies and makes sense, we also have a direct referral program. So that might appeal to you as well. We have general memberships. So if you as an individual want to join our membership and get just a general newsletter and access to updates and information, you absolutely can just email us at info@biaia.org, and we can get you through the process of applying for our general membership. If you are looking to join our Iowa Brain Injury Resource Network, or even just have a conversation about that, I can absolutely chat with you about that offline as well. I'll have my email address coming. Monica mentioned, and I did throw up the slide when she was speaking about the training that we have coming up with Rachel Ramirez. I see already that I have a typo. She is not speaking till 10:41. She's speaking till 10:45 a.m. on January 21st. We do have, and I see that Allison Andrews, one of our staff at the Alliance, has put in the events page for all of the different trainings that we offer. These are free trainings that you can access. And this particular training that are on your screen right now with Dr. Frank Sparadio and Rachel Ramirez are being hosted by the Department of Public Health in conjunction with the National Association of State Injury Administrators. So in addition to that, that concludes kind of our slide deck. I have our contact information up here. I do want to go ahead and just double check to see if we've got any questions coming in. One question that was asked early on that I want to make note of was a question around the screening tool, and whether or not that includes like brain scans, if that's what we were talking about. The screening tool that we were addressing, the one that we have here in Iowa, the modified Ohio State University traumatic brain injury identification tool, that is more of a questionnaire. And we do have training available if your organization is interested in implementing brain injury screening. We do have that available. And then I do see another question here. Alyssa, is membership free? Our general memberships, yes, we do have free memberships, and we can post the membership information, or you can find the membership information on our website. I also am going to post here a feedback survey for you all to join, to maybe put information in. There are some pieces of information with being gathered within this survey. As far as if you want to engage in conversation, get additional information, that type of information, you can indicate that on that survey. Desiree, when and where will this recording be posted? Fantastic question. All of our webinars that we do that we have recorded are posted on our YouTube platform. So if you go to YouTube and search Brain Injury Alliance of Iowa, like and subscribe subscribe to our channel, and you will see all of the different recordings that we have available. Thank you, Allison. She's helping me out a great deal, getting different links and whatnot up there. I would invite you as well to consider following us on a variety of social media. Our primary platforms tend to be Facebook and LinkedIn, so you can find us there as well. Let's see. Wendy Harrison asked, can you grab the app for phones that was in the newsletter a while ago and pop it in the chat? Oh goodness. Okay, I might have to. Wendy, can you indicate which newsletter, perhaps? And we can maybe go back to complete task. Allison, you might remember the name of that app.
So it was in a newsletter a while ago.
Okay.
The task completion app for those with brain injuries.
Yes, we can work on grabbing that. If we can't grab it before we close out today, we will absolutely be able to get that emailed to you. But that's a great point, Wendy, that you bring up in terms of opportunities and apps. This is something that our neuro resource facilitators can be available for as well. You can contact our resource facilitators to find out about different apps, different strategies to manage a variety of things. All right, I'm not seeing any additional questions come in quite yet, just some thank yous. And I definitely want to take the time to say thank you to Monica for joining us today so that we can get this information out and shared. I think it was a great informational session, just kind of wet our whistle a little bit. And I look forward to hearing from folks on maybe additional information that you're looking for. And with that, I will go ahead and leave the platform open just a little bit longer for folks that might have questions, but you're welcome to go ahead and log out.